Welcome to The Undefined Leader, where we reimagine leadership, redefine work, and get curious. This week, Gallup came out with their Global Leadership Report, and the title of the report is What Followers Want. So what they did is they went to multiple countries and asked two simple questions to define what people truly want from their leaders. So before we give you guys the answer of what they found, I'm curious what your answer is to these questions, Derek. So here are the two questions.
I don't remember the questions, so I'm
I know.
curious.
Well, this will be your authentic answer. Okay, so these are two questions that were asked. What leader has the most positive influence on your daily life? Followed by, now please list 3 words that best describe what this person contributes to your life.
Those are interesting questions. Those are good questions. I'm stalling a little bit while I'm thinking about it. But there is just kind of a little bit of thing here I want to say too, in that this kind of gets into a little bit of like the circle of influence versus your circle of control. I don't know if you've heard those concepts before.
Tell me about it.
Alex, I think they come from like Stephen Covey and like Habits of Highly Effective People. But that's immediately what popped into my mind, because I think most people put a lot of thought and thinking and emphasis into leaders that don't actually affect their life that much. And the reality is the ones that do affect your life, like this question is, on a daily basis, are just much more micro and local on things. So I think it would be hard, really, really hard pressed to actually say that like the president of the US affects your life on a daily basis. So that would be like outside of the sphere of control. Like things influence you. So to answer this question, you have to get like really micro, right? So obviously for me, being in the US, and again, this was a global thing, so different regions and things are going to have different things, but it has to be my like direct reporting supervisor as someone that I interact with on almost a daily basis. That's probably the leader that I have the most interaction with. And so I think just for me in the context, that would be my answer there. Before I do the second one, what about for you, Alex?
You stalled so hard that you didn't even answer the question, Derek. But you're absolutely right. And majority of the people that answered this question was your direct supervisor, because they directly impact your day-to-day the most. But for anyone that's listening and you want to follow along and answer this question for yourself, not everyone picked a leader that is in their business. A lot of people picked a family leader, a political leader, a coach on your basketball team, a friend. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional business manager or leader. The 3 words that come to my mind of what that best describe the person and the attributes that contribute to my life is, I think, caring, lifting up. So someone that doesn't necessarily judge you, but wants you to grow and supports you. And the other one is open-mindedness. Not just like they have open-mindedness, but they promote open-mindedness within me. So a leader that I really like to follow and someone that I can talk to for hours is someone that they might be educated, they might be smart, they might have a lot of experience, but they don't necessarily push their agenda on me or others. They listen to your point of view. They ask questions. They're curious. They ask questions. And then they ask a question so much that makes me question my belief in the first place. And now I have an open mind going into that subject. So those are the 3 things that I can think of.
So this question is definitely like an aspirational thing. Like the question they're trying to get from people is, what do you want to have out of that person? And you're right about like, there's so many different types of leaders. Because again, it could be like a pastor or someone like that in like a religious type of context, a sport type of context. I guess, again, for me, it would be hard to point to anyone on a frequent daily. That was like the question, a daily basis that's not work related. So the direct supervisor, and I'm pretty close with you as well of what I want, from whoever happens to be in that position of empathy, of listening, I prefer leaders that challenge me. And, I don't necessarily need like inspiration or motivation. We've talked about that before on other episodes, but clarity for me is really important too, of again, like the why of why we're doing things and the strategy. So that's kind of like the things that I would place that I want the most.
I feel like our answers are pretty aligned. So much so that it's almost like we created a podcast
Ooh.
so we can actually talk about these things on a daily basis. Okay, so Gallup, after their research, after they asked those 2 questions, they came up with 4 answers. These are the 4 needs that people are wanting from their leaders. Number 1 being hope, the need to feel positive about the future for leaders to provide a very clear vision and direction. Number 2, trust, the need for honesty, respect, and integrity. Number 3, compassion, the need to feel cared about and listened to. And number 4 is stability, the need for physical safety and secure foundations during times of uncertainty. What did you think when you saw those 4 as being the most common?
The whole report, and I encourage everyone to go and read it from Gallup. It just came out like this week. And I think too, they do this like annually also. So it wasn't like a brand new report. And part of what my mind too is I'm curious, like as things change too, if you went back through like previous reports, it was not like shock, but I think what maybe surprised me was that of those 4 things, that hope is number 1. And even when you dive into the report, it's not just like kind of number 1. It is like number 1 by like a huge margin.
Mm-hmm.
It's hope, and then it's the other 3 after that. And then something too that's interesting in there is it's when you just have hope by itself, they kind of get into like the mixtures of things like that, but it's really like hope, like when you combine trust and stability with hope, doing things like that. But hope's kind of like the anchor point that people want. And just timing wise, it's just kind of interesting because our previous episode we did was on toxic positivity. And part of what we talked about as the anecdote is hope with realism
Mm-hmm.
involved with it. So we were kind of already like nearing a topic of speaking a little bit about hope, but as an antidote to some other things. So that's kind of like all the things that I was thinking. What about for you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not as surprised with trust, compassion, and stability. Those are things that we've talked a lot about in other episodes. Plus, it comes up in so much research. So many articles talk about security, stability, trust, caring, people first. So I think I've just like sat with that information for such a long time that it makes sense to me. Hope. I think this is the first time that I'm seeing that word, something that people need the most. But the more I sat with it after reading the report, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, think of what we've been going through for the last 5 years or so. We went through a pandemic where we had no idea when we're going to be able to leave our homes again. There were so many political and government instability and not sure of what's going to happen next and how it's going to affect ourselves. There's so many dark things that are happening in the world. And even when you turn on the news, the first thing you see is negative news. Like I don't know the last time I turned on the news and I saw something positive, something that gives me hope. So I think we've just been down that road for such a long time. As humans, we're just really craving a better way to live. We're hoping that all this tough times was worth for something and we're going to come out of it in a better place.
Yeah. Speaking of Gallup, I know both of us have taken the Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder, where it talks about as a leader, your different strengths. It's really interesting, Alex. And I know for you that a lot of your strengths are people oriented things,
Mm-hmm.
positivity, woo, relationship building, communications. My strengths tend to be a little bit more in like the strategy realm of things. But for you as a person with strengths in this area, do you think that you lead with hope, or do you think that as a leader, you give your followers hope?
Good question. I'm not sure. I hope that I do, but I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about hope that much. And so now, after reading this report and this conversation, I'm sure I'm going to keep it front of mind more. But I think I do, because in the businesses that I worked for in the past, we've gone through very challenging situations. And I think it's a little bit of the, hey, I'm in it because I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the vision of this company. I believe in this. And so I think that comes out in conversations that I have with the team as well. And see, okay, well, if my leader has hope that we're going to be able to get out of this, then okay, I believe her. Let's go through it. What do you think? Do you think you believe in hope, or have you seen me act in hope or not? Lead in hope or not?
And I think kind of a little of the theme of this is hope is kind of maybe a little different lens that we're looking at things through.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you bring a lot of positivity in your leadership style. You bring a lot of, I think, motivation. Like now we're like dialing things in a little bit of what's the difference between like inspiration and hope, or what's the difference between feeling motivation and feeling hope. Because if you feel like there's no hope, you're probably not going to be too motivated or too inspired to do something. So now we're kind of getting like really into nuance and complexity of maybe even what exactly is hope, just from a definition standpoint. For me, I don't view myself as like a leader that brings a ton of positivity or cheerleading into the equation, but I do kind of think I bring my own version of hope with
Mm-hmm.
like, here's a real plan. Here's a real strategy that shows that we can handle this challenge, that we can work on something. It's not guaranteeing an outcome, but at least there's like a way to accomplish things. I feel like that can bring some hope. And again, I'm speaking from, a Western US business type of sense. This is a global report, so someone who is in a country that's currently being bombed, I don't think a business strategy is going to bring a whole lot of hope, for that specific person and what they're looking for. But in the context that we're operating in, I think that can bring hope maybe into a situation where people are unsure how we're going to get through it.
Absolutely. You have given me so much hope during time of distress and burnout by problem solving. You do have a vision and you're very good at solving problems. And so you being able to say, hey, I don't think it's this challenging of a situation that we're in. Let's kind of break it down. And what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we did that? That gives hope as well of, oh, there's a better way. There's something that we can do to get out of this situation as well. So I completely agree. Hope doesn't necessarily mean positivity or optimism. I think it
Mhm.
could be you could just have hope and belief in solving a problem or getting through it. The interesting thing that I saw in that report said they they aligned suffering as an attribute that lacks hope. So when there's no hope, there's suffering. What do you think of that?
The absence of hope is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that does make sense. Suffering feels like a very active thing, versus like if you got hope on one side and you got something else on the other side, and then, is there like kind of a neutral in between? So I'm not exactly sure on the full equation on if those things are really like opposites on a spectrum, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, I would imagine that a strong feeling of suffering is usually accompanied with an attachment of a loss of hope, that it's never going to work out. It's hopeless. It's futile. Yeah, that would lead to a lot of suffering.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a bold statement to make, but it makes sense. I think human beings, we're tough creatures. We can go through a lot of very challenging, difficult times. We can go through a lot of suffering, but it's almost like if there's a reason for it, if there's a why for it, if there's a why of, okay, I'm going to go through this really challenging time in order to make an impact on the world, in order to come out as a better person, in order to whatever. It gives you a little bit of meaning to go through that challenging time as well. So it makes sense that suffering is the opposite of hope.
I'm just sitting here. I Googled what is hope.
Tell me.
It says hope is an optimistic feeling that something good will happen, even if it's not guaranteed. It's a way of thinking and an emotion that can help people stay motivated and positive during difficult times. So it's a few words stand out to me. It's a feeling, it's an
Hmm.
emotion, and it's a way to stay motivated.
Yeah. So I was grinning so hard when you were talking about inspiration, motivation, because that is 100% what I was thinking about when I was reading it as well. So going to using that definition for hope in work, in school, even when we're talking about management, we talk about motivation so much. We talk about how are you motivating your team? How are you motivated? You have to be more motivated. After reading this report, do you think we're focused on the wrong thing? Do you think it's not actually motivation, but it's hope that we should, as leaders, be focusing on more?
It's a good thought because I think all leaders want to be good motivators, recognize the need to having motivated followers, whatever the context is. I think most leaders want to be inspirational or inspire people. It is, again, a different lens to look at it through of maybe instead of just trying to like motivate them with words, to actually have a way that gives them hope, and the hope will lead to the motivation
Mm-hmm.
and the inspiration. I'm not sure I've ever thought about it in those terms before, or really like self-reflected as a leader. Am I giving hope? I think I've maybe trying to analyze like how motivated are my followers or how inspired are we feeling, even personally, like how motivated am I versus how burnt out am
Mm-hmm.
I? And I don't think I've ever used the lens of hope as the
Mm-mm.
equation for any of that. But in a way, then if we're kind of talking about bringing words into this, is burnout when you think it's kind of hopeless?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm coming more to the conclusion that hope is the long term, the ultimate goal, and motivation, inspiration are the today acts of part of hope. Motivation comes from hope. So, for example, even if why do you go to the gym? Why do you have like go on a diet or something? It's the hope of you're going to become stronger or more fit or feel better in your body. It's the hope of later on that gives you the motivation to go to the gym that day, right? So, are we just too focused as leaders on the short-term wins, the short-term motivations? That is what causes burnout because we're driving so much high performance from so many like little things that we forget what all those little things connect to that bigger picture of that vision, that hope.
Yeah. Hope, the way that we use the word hope a lot too, maybe has kind of led to this little bit of not using it in this lens that we're talking about. So I sort of feel like we use hope in normal everyday conversations almost as like a wishful type of word. Like, I hope we get
Mm.
bonuses this year. I hope, it snows and we have a snow day. Like hope is, I feel
Like a
like
dream.
yeah, it's like a really downplayed word that we use as just like a wish type of thing. But I think in the context of this report and what we're talking about, it's a much bigger thing than that, and it's a much larger word than that, than like the everyday use of the word.
Hmm. I think so. When I think of hope, I keep thinking of the TV show Ted Lasso. It was such a big part of his leadership. It was for anyone that didn't watch Ted Lasso, first of all, absolutely go and watch it. It's an amazing TV show. But one of the first things he does is he writes a word believe and puts it on the top of the door. And later on, throughout the TV show, anytime the soccer team was about to fail or give up, or they were just really down on themselves, someone would go and touch the believe sign. So it was almost like, again, when you were down, it gave them that inspiration and motivation they needed in that moment of saying, I believe. And what do you think hope played in like Ted Lasso's leadership style? Because he took a soccer team that was not good at all and turned it into a pretty good team. Do you think hope really did play a role in that?
It's a good question, and I second the recommendation for watching it. I came into the show very, very late. It's just within like the last 6 months that I've watched the show that had been out for years, and it's just such a really good show. I'm also tying into the episode that we did previous. I would like to like a critical examination of Ted Lasso, and if there is also toxic positivity in his approach to things
Oh,
as well. That would be an interesting analysis.
yeah.
Because yeah, hope, belief. I don't know the relationship between those two quite yet. If hope requires like some type of belief, because for me, a belief is a lack of evidence that I need to believe that this is going to work out in the absence of evidence that this is going to work out. And then is that where hope comes into play? A little bit of Because now it tempts me then to start saying things that we just talked about as being toxic positivity, like trust the process. There's a plan, follow the plan, see it type of through, which I don't know if that's actually hope or not, or wishful thinking on things. So I think there could be a whole kind of like critical analysis of all these things come together. But I think like, someone that has like a leadership style of Ted Lasso, there's just something charismatic and there's something transformational. Like we talked about transformation leadership styles, that it's like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I'll do it with that person because they give me something, and maybe it is hope. Maybe that character is of getting kind of like lack of evidence. There's no evidence that he knows what he's doing, even per se. So there's just something about him that I want to do it with him, and I want to be on the same team with him. And maybe that is hope. Maybe that is what that is.
Yeah. I can see what you're talking about of that boundary of toxic positivity and hope. It was interesting to me that in the report, hope was so much further away from the secondary, which was trust. And I kept thinking of, can you truly have hope in a person, a leader that you don't trust? And maybe that's the answer to toxic positivity. It's not the you got this, just trust the process that you're forcing on. But the reason I had hope from you, Derek, when you were solving those challenging problems is because I also trust you. I trust that you've done this before, you've solved problems before, we've gone through it together and it ended up being good. So now I trust and I have hope in our abilities to go through another challenging time. So I'm curious, do you think hope can exist without trust?
Probably not, because it's probably not. And I love how we're using Ted Lasso on this too, but that was basically, he had to earn their trust first.
Mm-hmm.
So, when he first put believe up on the wall, like, everyone thought like, this is a joke. Right. And it wasn't until he earned their trust and built trust that people could maybe start to have that hope there. So it's almost like trust came first and then hope came
Mm-hmm.
after it, versus I hope I can trust this guy. I'm not sure it works that way. Kind of to your
Yeah.
point. So it seems like building trust and earning trust does lead to the ability to have hope and things, versus the other way around.
Interesting.
I know we have to wrap this up, but kind of final thoughts that you have on this, on leading with hope?
No, my brain is just going a million miles an hour right now. And I appreciate conversations when I can walk away with feeling more curious and wanting, like having the inspiration and motivation to go and figure it out. So once we're done with this episode, I'm going to go and think about Ted Lasso and hope. And if hope can exist without trust, and maybe we'll even do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, I know this wasn't necessarily like actionable tips. It was us talking this through, like literally, and thinking about it. But for me, it has led, just like you, I do feel some motivation to explore this topic further and just question a little bit too of, am I giving people hope? Are the people that look to me, for whatever type of leadership or things like that, do I give hope to people? And if so, how? And if not, why? Is it haven't earned their trust, haven't, whatever it is, like, in the absence of concrete actionable tips, I still feel like there's action from this episode.
It is the number one thing that employees need from their leaders is hope. So how about we all grow and learn, hope together, and figure it out? Thanks for listening.